In our previous episode, we delved into the chilling tale of the Mad Gasser of Mattoon, a shadowy figure who haunted a small Virginia town in the late 1930s, unleashing strange, suffocating vapors that left residents stricken and terrified. But just a few years later, an equally unsettling pattern emerges. Eerily similar attacks, this time in another town. Join us as we unravel the dark mystery of the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Mattoon, Illinois, in the mid-1940s, was a small but bustling Midwestern town with a population of about 15,000. Known for its agricultural roots, the town was surrounded by fertile farmland and dotted with modest homes, shops, and a few manufacturing facilities supporting the wartime economy. Mattoon had a close-knit, family-oriented community typical of small-town America at the time, with quiet neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, and a downtown area that served as the hub of activity. Life in Mattoon was marked by simplicity and routine, making the events which were about to befall the town all the more shocking. On the night of August 31st, 1944, as Mr. Urban Rafe drifted to sleep, something strange began to fill the air of his bedroom. He woke with a start, his body heavy with nausea and his head pounding. Struggling to his feet, he made his way to the bathroom, hoping the sudden sickness would pass. But as he returned to bed, his unease only deepened. The room carried an odd, sickly scent, and as he inhaled, his throat tightened further. He glanced at his wife, panic rising in his throat. "Did you leave the gas on?" he asked, his voice tight. Mrs. Rafe, confused, shook her head. She hadn't touched the stove, but the odor hung thick in the air, bitter and sweet all at once. When she attempted to get up to check, her body refused to respond. Her legs felt as if they had turned to stone, pinning her to the mattress. She tried again, her breath quickening as fear crawled up her spine. She couldn't move. Elsewhere, on the other side of town, another family was touched by the same terror. In the dead of night, a mother was startled awake by the sound of her daughter's violent coughing from another room. She sat up, heart racing, ready to rush to her child's side, but an invisible force seemed to hold her down. Her body, too, was paralyzed, pinned beneath the weight of something unseen. She strained against the sensation, but the harder she fought, the more futile it became. The air in the room was thick, suffocating as her daughter's coughing echoed in the darkness. It was just after 11 p.m. on the next night when Aline Kearney and her young daughter Dorothy settled into bed. The house was quiet, save for the soft murmur of the night outside. But moments after lying down, Aline caught a strange scent in the air. At first it seemed harmless, a faint sweet odor, perhaps from the flowers outside their window. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, the scent grew stronger, filling the room until it became unbearable. Aline's throat began to dry out and an uneasy tightness crept into her chest. She tried to sit up to get out of bed, but couldn't. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get her legs to move. Panic swelled inside her as the numbness spread, and a strangled scream escaped her lips. Her sister, Martha Reedy, visiting from out of town, heard the cry and rushed in from another room. As soon as she entered, the thick, sickly smell hit her too. Without hesitation, Martha bolted next door, pounding on the neighbor's door for help. Earl Robinson, the neighbor, immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, the air had cleared. The sweet, suffocating odor was gone, leaving only the lingering fear and confusion behind. Later that night, after the police had left, Aline's husband, Bert, returned home. Exhausted, he walked toward the house when something caught his eye. There, just outside the bedroom window, a figure stood motionless in the darkness. It was tall, dressed in dark clothing and a tight-fitting cap that obscured their face. Bert's heart raced as he ran toward the figure, but before he could get close, it disappeared into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. In the days that followed the Kearney incident, a wave of attacks swept through Mattoon as several residents began to report similar experiences. They spoke of a sudden infusion of a sickly sweet odor that soon earned the ominous nickname gardenia gas. For some, the effects were immediate and debilitating, leaving them paralyzed for as long as 90 minutes. On September 5th, Bola Cordes and her husband returned home after a long day, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on their path. As they approached the front door, Bola noticed something peculiar, a white cloth carefully positioned on the screen door. Intrigued, she leaned in for a closer look and discovered the center of the cloth was soaked with a strange liquid. Curiosity got the better of her. She brought the cloth closer to her face, inhaling its pungent scent. In an instant, a jolt shot through her body as if she had touched a live wire. It felt like an electric current, she later recounted. The sensation raced down my body to my feet and seemed to settle in my knees. It was a feeling of paralysis. As she nearly collapsed, her husband rushed to her side, helping her stumble inside as her strength ebbed away. Soon, Bola felt her lips swell and crack, pain blossoming in her mouth and throat like fire. Panic gripped her as she began to spit blood, her body reacting violently to the unknown threat. A doctor arrived to treat her symptoms, and within a few hours she began to recover. Determined to uncover the truth, Bola decided to investigate the area around her porch. Among the scattered debris, she found an old worn skeleton key and a mostly empty lipstick tube. Shaken but resolute, she handed over the key, cloth, and lipstick tube to the police. They promptly sent the cloth to the Illinois State Police Laboratory for analysis, yet by the time the lab examined it, the substance had apparently dissipated, leaving only questions and no conclusive results. As midnight approached on the same night of the Cordes attack, a woman's scream pierced the stillness, echoing through the quiet streets. Panicked, she dialed the police to report that a man had tried to force his way through her door. The sound of her terror had frightened him off. The following evening, around 10 p.m., Laura Junkin, who managed a restaurant with an apartment tucked in the back, stepped into her bathroom. It was then that she encountered a scent that sent a chill down her spine, a sickly aroma reminiscent of, quote, cheap perfume, a strong, sweet, flowery scent. As she inhaled, her legs buckled beneath her, and she grasped the sink for support, the room spinning around her as the paralyzing wave washed over her. Not far away, another couple was on high alert, having just reported a suspicious prowler lurking near their home. But only an hour later, their daughter, Glenda Hendershot, awoke, feeling an overwhelming wave of nausea. The parents exchanged worried glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They feared the prowler's presence was somehow connected to their daughter's sudden illness. At 1 a.m., 60-year-old Fred Goebel was jolted awake by violent illness. For the next 2 hours, he fought a relentless wave of extreme nausea. Meanwhile, his neighbor, Robert Daniels, was drawn to the commotion and peered out into the darkness. There he spotted a tall, thin man, darting away from Goebel's house and across his yard, the silhouette disappearing into the night. In the days that followed, the phantom attacker ignited a wave of sensational headlines across the nation. United Press stories brought the unsettling events in Mattoon to the forefront, and with that attention came a growing sense of panic. As the attacks continued to plague the town, frustration boiled over among the residents. Outrage simmered at the local police, who had yet to apprehend the elusive assailant. The situation was dire. The police force was woefully under-equipped, consisting of only 2 officers and 8 patrolmen, their cars lacking the vital communication radios that could have coordinated their efforts. As whispers of fear echoed through the streets, Police Commissioner Thomas Wright stood at the forefront, urging the community to remain calm amid the chaos. But his pleas fell on deaf ears as armed citizens began forming their own posses, taking matters into their own hands as they roamed the darkened streets, searching for the shadowy figure that had been stalking them. Though Commissioner Wright acknowledged the reality of some of the gas attacks, he also speculated that the influx of new reports flooding in could be due to panic and hysteria, yet even he admitted that not all of the attacks could be dismissed. On the night of September 10th, a widow named Bertha Bence was abruptly roused from her sleep by strange noises outside her front bedroom window. As she sat up, her heart racing, an unnerving scent began to seep into the room, a sweet gas that clung to the air. The noxious fumes caused her stomach to churn and her head to spin, leaving her with a disorienting sense of lightheadedness. In her state of distress, Bertha called out to her sons, who bolted from their beds in alarm. Just in time, they caught a glimpse of a dark-clad figure fleeing down a nearby back alley, vanishing into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. Shaken, the brothers rushed outside to investigate, their eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the intruder. In the soft soil of the flower bed just outside their mother's window, they found the footprints of a woman's high-heeled shoes. On that same night, 4 additional victims fell prey to the gasser, and a legitimate panic began to spread. In response to the escalating crisis, state police and even the FBI arrived to investigate the alarming situation. But once the FBI arrived, things changed. Suddenly, the local police department, which had the day before been actively engaged in the search for the assailant, abruptly shifted their stance. They now cited their inability to find the culprit as proof that no attacker existed at all. In a shocking turn of events, officials now announced that anyone who called the police to report an attack would be taken to the Mattoon Memorial Institution for examination. This decision sent a chill through the community as simultaneously much of the press transformed its coverage. Publications which had been reporting on the attacker suddenly began to mock those who dared to come forward with their experiences. This abrupt change in tone, like that from the police, came almost overnight, leaving victims feeling isolated and helpless. One newspaper, the Mattoon Journal-Gazette, resisted the new narrative imposed on residents. Its editors wrote that it was, quote, an indisputable fact that a Mad Gasser existed. The paper identified, quote, 2 principal reasons why he was not caught. One is that our police failed to take the case seriously enough at first. The other is that when the police finally decided there was something to it, mass hysteria and outside interference combined to make their efforts unsuccessful. Academia soon weighed in from the comfort of distant cities. Psychologist and lecturer Donald A. Laird effectively sidelined the story when he declared that the entire affair, from start to finish, was the result of mass hysteria. In the December 3, 1944 issue of American Weekly, he stated, quote, "For some reason, women are more susceptible to mass suggestion than men." Laird noted reports of a gasser should be dismissed outright because the majority of such reports came from women, or at least they involved women in some way. He further implied that there couldn't be a real attacker, because if there was one, they would have been caught. The absence of an arrest, he concluded, suggested that no attacker was ever present. Mainstream academia swiftly embraced the mass hysteria theory. In a 1945 issue of the Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology, Donald Johnson, then a first-year undergraduate at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, conducted an inquiry seemingly based on the premise that the Mattoon gasser was a psychological construct. After interviewing many victims, he asserted, quote, "The case of the phantom anesthetist was entirely psychogenic." By this time, the Journal-Gazette, likely weary of the ridicule that accompanied their previous support for apparent victims of the gas attacks, altered its own position. When the issue of Abnormal and Social Psychology was published, the Journal-Gazette embraced it, referring to the undergraduate Johnson as a professor, without attempting to contact any of the gasser's victims for their perspectives. They also did not seek follow-up commentary from Johnson. Despite the prevailing narrative of mass hysteria, many remained unconvinced by the dismissal of the gasser's existence. The consistency and specificity of the victims' accounts suggested a genuine threat rather than a collective illusion. Numerous individuals reported similar symptoms and experiences independently, making it unlikely that such a wide-ranging phenomenon could be solely attributed to psychological suggestion. Additionally, the physical evidence collected, such as the footprints and pieces of cloth, further supported the notion that something sinister was at play. The late physicist Willie Smith outright rejected the mass hysteria hypothesis. In the 1980s, he wrote, "The best documented cases of mass hysteria have occurred in enclosed spaces, such as workplaces or schools. The contagious behavior usually stems from a single case or trigger event. For the Mattoon case, there was no event that could have triggered a mass hysteria. The three initial incidents, August 31st and September 1st, were real but had no immediate influence, as they were not publicized until September 2nd. Even then, and in spite of the sensationalist headlines and the extensive newspaper coverage, they failed to generate any new cases until September 5th. To accept the mass hysteria theory, then, one must be willing to alter the concept of what mass hysteria actually is. There is a lesson somewhere in the story of the Mad Gasser, or Gassers, of Botetourt County in Mattoon. While the police found, but subsequently denied, evidence of an attacker, the victims' accounts seemed very genuine, as did their injuries. The theory of mass panic caused by hysterical women seems woefully inadequate, though some skeptics still cling to it today, dutifully omitting the part about the women, while insisting 1940s academia can otherwise be trusted as experts on human nature. Other skeptics of a gasser suggest the Mattoon incident was a mass panic caused by the media. Yet many of these same skeptics would bristle at the suggestion that the media should be taken with a grain of salt nowadays. So it seems, either we accept that the Mad Gasser or gassers were real, or we accept the theories of some very problematic academics, or we accept that it was all the media's fault because they were very irresponsible back then, but are very trustworthy now. Whatever the true answer may be, these stories of mad gassers bring to mind the power, not of mass hysteria, but of fear, and how easily it can spread. Whether the fear in these cases came from a real physical threat or was manufactured by the media, we can't say we know for certain. All we do know with any degree of certainty is that what happened in Mattoon, Illinois and Botetourt County, Virginia, reveals a deeply unsettling truth, that whatever it really was, whatever really happened, could very well happen again.